We Say What They Can't Radio.
Coming to you live here from the beautiful studios, We Say What They Can't in downtown Brooklyn, New York City. We're here today to talk to you about voting. I have some very special guests in the house. We're going to be speaking to them and getting their perspectives on what it is to vote in this very crucial upcoming midterm election cycle. We have Mr. Amir Abadi here. How you doing, sir? Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. We have Miss Naila Amaru here. How you doing this morning, Naila?
I am blessed. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And we have Mr. Anthony Beckford here with us today. How you doing, sir?
I'm good.
Miss Naila, tell us a little bit about your background and what brings you here today with us.
Absolutely. So I am Naila Amaru, and I'm an advocacy and policy strategist based here in Brooklyn, New York. And I have, throughout my career, worked at every level of government, from City Hall to the Capitol to Capitol Hill. And I've also worked on behalf of community-based organizations and nonprofits as it relates to helping them connect to government officials when it comes to legislative issue campaigns. And I come into this conversation through the perspective as a millennial who is part of America's largest electoral bloc, which is something that we're definitely going to discuss here in this conversation, and again, to share my insight and what I know to help people bring out to the polls.
You're with an organization called VoteRunLead.
Yes.
And I think what you guys are doing is great. Down there. You promote women to run for office. Tell us a little bit about VoteRunLead and how you became involved with the organization.
Absolutely. So VoteRunLead is a nonpartisan, nonprofit national organization, and our mission is to change the face of political leadership here in America. And what we want to do is basically to train women to run for public office and to win. And so we have a curriculum. We host national regional trainings where women, depending on where they are in the nation, can come together and, number one, begin to build a network and learn the technical aspects of what does it mean to craft a campaign plan. Okay. What does it take to win? How do you move from this decision of I'm going to run to I'm going to move from this vision of me in office to me executing tactical operations to make that happen? Right. And I think one of the things that I love most deeply about the work that we do is I am also an alumna, and I'm currently a certified national trainer with the organization. Okay. But I think fundamental to our work is inviting women to look at ourselves in a different way, right? I have worked so many campaigns, I've lost count. I've worked at the city level, congressional, mayoral, federal, and my story is no different from millions of other women out there. We are the volunteers, we are the fundraisers, yeah. We are the ones organizing events, we are Absolutely. Knocking on doors, we are telling our girlfriends to vote for, this person. We are, after Absolutely. Church services, we are bringing half the congregation to the polls, right. But we are very rarely the ones to offer our leadership on the ballot. And our lived experiences as women of color in particularly, we have this tremendous value to bring into this political sphere, and we are not part of the conversation. And so fundamental to the work that we do at VoteRunLead is, again, aside from the campaign training, which is absolutely essential to executing winning campaigns, right. But it's also, again, an invitation for women to learn to look at themselves in a different way, specifically through the lens of political leadership.
That's great. That's great. I see that you guys have a very high success rate, too, of the women that have come out of your program and that have actually run for office. What do you attribute that to?
Absolutely. So our win rate is over 70% of our alumni right. go on to win their first campaigns. Mm-hmm. And also, I'm very proud to say that a good majority of our alum are also women of color. Okay. And I think, again, we attribute that to a few things. Number one, a support network is so critical. Oftentimes, offering your leadership in such a public way, particularly as a woman, in today's society, mm-hmm. it is a very scary thing. And oftentimes, right. It can feel like you are the only one. Right. And, when you're offering your leadership for the first time, particularly with the gender dimensions of what does it mean to run for office as a woman? It's a very different experience than it is to run for office as a man. And then you add all the other dimensions as a Latina, as a Black woman, as an Asian woman. The racial dimensions definitely play an element into perception and how do you navigate those obstacles. And so I think it's number one, we we train women how to enter politics with a purpose. And again, making sure that the women who come into our space and are a place where they want to offer their leadership politically, that we provide them the support network and we provide them with the right training that they need. Because again, we are in the business of not just running women for office just to run. We are in the business of changing the face of political leadership, and we do that by preparing women the best way that we can with the expertise of campaign management, with the network of supportive women across the nation who are going through the same thing or have gone through the same thing or about to go into the same thing. Right. And also, I think whether you win or you lose, you walk away on election night with this unique experience that so few Americans have, which is you offered yourself to the public politically as a woman to run for public office. And that is an experience that very few people understand. And so we create this space, this network, this organization. It's more than just an organization. I think, again, it's a sisterhood of women from, again, across the political spectrum, across the nation, for every level of government. We're successful because we create this space that connects all those different elements of what it takes to run for office as a woman in America.
That's great. And you said something very crucial about how it's different and more difficult for a woman to run for office.
Absolutely. So throughout the history of America and the world, leadership has always been assumed a masculine trait. And so because men have traditionally held the formal positions of leadership, there is this unconscious expectation of what leadership looks like, and it unfortunately looks like male. Okay. And so one of the challenges is always, the change has to begin with the woman to begin to understand and see that leadership is not always this thing that we have thought it was, and that leadership looks different and it looks like us. And so I think that the biggest change in this decision of, I want to get involved with my community because I'm not happy with what's going on. Not enough is being done, or my elected officials aren't representing me the way that I think they should. There's something that happens from identifying the problem as something that happens over there and something that other people do to fix it, to I am the one who has the responsibility and the leadership to change the things that I want to change. And when that shift happens, women were unstoppable, right? Because once we fully step into our leadership, because we recognize the power that we have, because we recognize the value of our experience, because we recognize the need for our voices to be part of the conversation, when we understand that we cannot wait for an invitation to the table of power, but that we're snatching seats left and right and we're dragging it to the table, and we're bringing all our girlfriends with us. That is when we begin to change the conversation about what issues are we talking about as a community. What are the policies that include my perspective, my lived experience as a woman of color? Because traditionally, when we're talking about legislative priorities, they're understood through the framework of male domination, because that's who makes up our legislative bodies, right? Absolutely. And so when we have diversity in government, particularly in elected positions in our legislative bodies, there's that diversity of thought and diversity of perspectives that brings so much value to this idea called democracy, right? And so when my perspective is not represented in conversations that result in laws and policies that govern my everyday life, then that's a problem. Then democracy doesn't include me. Then this idea, we the people, does not mean me as a woman of color, me as all the identities and labels that we carry and some that we're burdened with. And so I think, again, that there's this process, and that process from going from point A, there's a problem, to point B, I'm the solution, begins with this realization of our own power and learning how to step fully into that power and exercising it, not for the sake of yielding it just to yield it, but for the sake of building community and making the change that we want to see.
When you encourage women to run, do they have to have any particular party affiliation, or are they just running based upon their own ideals and you guys are giving them the blueprint on exactly how to do it? What's your criteria for that?
So VoteRunLead is a nonpartisan organization. Okay. So we encourage women from across the political spectrum to offer their leadership. And that's really important, again, because diversity of thought, diversity of perspective is really important when we're having conversations about what issues are important and thinking about solutions to those problems. And we certainly get more quality conversations legislatively if there's diversity in that thought. So to be clear, we are a nonpartisan organization, and we encourage every woman who's interested across the spectrum, no matter her political party, to again offer her leadership.
Have you noticed at all, though, whether or not most of the women that decide to run and ask you guys for direction, do they lean towards one party or another?
Yes, a good number of our women who come through our training programs do identify as Democrat, but we certainly have Republicans, Libertarians, Green Party candidates. Again, we welcome any woman who is interested in running for office. We provide her that training. I will be remiss to say that particularly for these last 2 election cycles, since the 2016 elections, we have a plethora of women on the Democratic side offering their leadership. Political activism has a lot of different forms that you can engage in, right? And so political activism is certainly volunteering on a campaign. If you have the financial means, support the good candidates that speak to your values and are, pushing for policies that you're supportive of because they speak to what's important to you. You can volunteer, you can donate, you can organize. But for most people, who don't necessarily live and breathe politics in the quote unquote traditional way, something as simple as, I know people fall on 2 sides of what's called clicktivism in terms of social media. But one of the issues of why people don't get involved is because they don't think that they're impacted personally or because they don't trust government. And we have to unpack the reasons why do people not trust government. And it goes back to government accountability, right? Particularly for us in communities of color, we elect politicians who give great speeches, tell us what we want to hear, and then they go into office and they fail us time and time again, right? And then the onus becomes on us because we're electing them into office time and time again without the accountability of, you said you were going to do this and you didn't. So either I have the decision as a citizen to continue to vote for you, even though you have, a track record of broken promises, or I can find ways to engage opportunities or create opportunities to hold you accountable so you can either do what you said that you were going to do or find the person who's willing to do it. And so I think that it requires, I think a realization for ourselves as private citizens that government is not this abstract, vague institution that is all powerful and we can do nothing to change it, right? And I think oftentimes, particularly as people of color, as communities of color, as a voting bloc, we give away our power too freely and too easily because we've already given up on the system, understandably because the system has failed us time again, right? But when we give away our power because we don't recognize our power, we're failing ourselves, we're failing our children, and we're failing our neighborhoods. And so I think for those who have so many things going on in our lives, because we do, right? Everyone has a side hustle. The bill is due, the baby needs new shoes, the car got put on blocks, and so now we have, so life happens. But I think finding a way that you can engage, whether that's, something online or whether that's something as time intensive as volunteering for a campaign for 1 or 2 hours, right? At the end of the day, this is about
that's how it starts.
Right, finding a way that connects with you. Not everybody feels comfortable knocking on doors, right? That's not for everybody, and that's okay, right? For some people, somebody would rather cut a check than donate 2 or 3 hours of their time, and that's fine. But just finding a venue that speaks to you, whether that's supporting a candidate, whether that's supporting a party, that you can say, I'm part of this. Because ownership, which we often don't feel, as communities of color is so important because we have never really been part of the process because, as the point has been made prior in this conversation, this process was never meant to include us. And so we have this responsibility of finding ways that we can infiltrate the system and either choose to hold it accountable from within by being the elected officials or holding the system accountable from without as advocates, right? By making sure that these elected officials who do fail us, how do we make them accountable? And that goes back to we have to be engaged, because if you're not part of my voter universe as an elected official and I know that you don't vote, I have really no incentive to make you happy because you're not part of the voting block that I depend on to get reelected. But if I know that you come out and vote, and if I know that I'm going to do something or come out against an issue that you're supportive of, and I know that you vote, I'm going to have to think twice about what is the cost to me as an elected official if I come out for or against. I always say, in this line of business, press, money, and votes are the three things that matter most to politicians. If I come out for or against, is this going to cost me good coverage? Or is this gonna garner me good coverage, or is this gonna cost me negative press coverage? Money. If I do something that makes you angry and you're a voter, you're not gonna cut checks to my reelection campaign, and that's something you have to take in consideration. But if I do something, then I can send out a little press release and I can say, look what I did, and I can use that for an ask for campaign donations for my reelection. And most importantly, this goes back to us as everyday people, the vote. Right, press, money, and votes. Regardless of, press, regardless of the money, at the end of the day, if we're not happy with what our elected representatives are doing, we can choose to fire them in the voting booth, or we can choose to support them and rehire them. And we do not have that power unless we show up and hold them accountable.
Exactly. What are some of the qualifications I have to have? Do I have to be born in the U.S.? Do I have to be 21 or over, 18 or over? What do I have to be in order to run if I'm a woman that's looking to get out there and vote, run, and lead?
So legally, each elected position has its own rules. Like you have to be a certain age, having had to have lived in the district a certain amount of time. In terms of qualifications, I think this is one of the most beautiful and frustrating parts of democracy, is that we get to decide as voters what we look for in our elected officials. So, for example, me personally, I look at a candidate through the lens of, one, where do they stand on the positions that are important to me? And two, what are their leadership and experience in terms of what are they bringing into this particular office? And so for leadership, is that integrity? Or the ability to communicate? Do they have the ability to build coalitions to be successful as an elected official? But again, because we live in a representative democracy, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? I have, worked campaigns and knocked on doors of people who, quite frankly, could not care less about qualifications, but were more focused on, are they man or are they woman? Are they Black, Latino? Do they look like me? And so, again, as a millennial, I have a lot of different layers that I look for in terms of who I support. Primarily, again, where do they stand on the positions, and what are their leadership and experience qualifications. But for a woman who is interested in running, I think it's really important that we change this conversation about what does it mean to be qualified to run for office. Because to the point that was made, oftentimes there are career politicians who are essentially groomed to become elected officials one day. And that's certainly one track. But I think that in doing so, we lose an opportunity as communities, as neighborhoods, as an electorate to really begin to build a legislative body that is really diverse and has a lot of different experience. And I think that is what makes government work the best, is that when we're confronting a problem, if everyone has the same experience, then we're only going to have a limited number of solutions that are going to be stifled in terms of creativity and innovation.
Absolutely.
And so if you're a woman and you're interested in running for office, do not fall into this false narrative that you have to have a certain number of years experience or a specific type of experience, or you have to have a particular type of degree or a number of degrees. All of that is irrelevant so long as you have the passion to serve the public interest, so long as you have this rooted commitment within you to serve your community, and that you are willing to put in the work, the blood, sweat, and tears, the sweat equity, to make change. And so, I offer to any woman listening, if you're interested in running for office, know that you are qualified and that you are more than capable of doing what men have been doing since the inception of our Constitution, and we can do it better. So run for office, 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 run for office.
All right, well, on that note, we have a quick 2 minutes left before we sign off, Baby One. So tell us where folks can find you at and where you can be found, and tell us a little bit about how they can find you online, your social media platforms, websites, things of that nature.
Absolutely. So I am a national trainer and alumna of VoteRunLead, and we can be found at hashtag VoteRunLead. And also our Twitter handle is VoteRunLead, and my personal Twitter handle is my name, NAILAHAMARU. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions about running for office.
We thank you for joining us. Thank all of my great guests.
Thanks for having us.
Naila Amaru, and Mr. Anthony Beckford. You guys have a great day and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Goodbye.